Welcome to It's Alive, where we host a space every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern to talk about developments in the world of VBI and meet with the people who are making them happen. I'm Scott Santons. I've been researching, writing, and advocating for the concept of UBI for the last 10 years. For those new to the concept, UBI stands for Unconditional or Universal Basic Income. It's the idea that every individual in a society can and should be guaranteed a periodic cash payment without means test or work requirement in order to make their way in the world upon a firm foundation. I recently started the Income to Support All Foundation, or ITSA Foundation, which provides support to projects that aim to make UBI a reality through research, storytelling, and implementation. You can learn more at itsafoundation.org. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Conrad Shaw and Josh Worth, co-founders of Comingle. Comingle is one of the first projects we're promoting at the ITSA Foundation. Josh, you want to tell people what Comingle is all about? Josh, you there?
Sure am. I was talking while muted.
That'll do it.
I'll tell you about Comingle is a money sharing app we're developing that allows people to pool a percentage of their income into a community fund that gets divided up evenly and distributed as a weekly basic income. The result
Oh,
is
cool.
that members give money when they have it and get money when they need it, so that no member ever goes a week without income. And you can learn all about it at comingle.us.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
Conrad, do you want to add anything?
No, let's jump right in.
All righty. So before we jump into the conversation, I just want to let everyone know too that we have a special guest today, or actually multiple special guests today, Tom Cooper and Jessie Golem. Tom Cooper was involved and very knowledgeable about the Ontario pilot. He's part of the Hamilton Poverty Roundtable. And Jessie Golem was actually one of the participants in the Ontario pilot. So we're really looking forward to getting into just everything that was the Ontario pilot, the what happened around its cancellation, what happened afterwards, and the lawsuit that's now going forward there as a result of that cancellation. But before we get to that conversation, too, I always like to just seed our conversation with a little bit of recent news. And the news I want to just make sure people know about this week, the things I'll include are just two news pieces that are quite related to the Ontario pilot that I just want everyone to know about. So one of the things that I want everyone to know is that there was yet another uh, report conclusion from another one of the pilots here in the U.S. This was in Seattle's King County, and this was a another kind of smaller pilot. This was 102 people who got $500 a month for 10 months, and here are the results. So employment nearly doubled from 37% to 66%. Average income from jobs went up by $410 per month. So it's almost the amount of basic income itself. Retirement plans nearly tripled. Percent of people with any savings of those with kids went from 0% to 42%. And percent of savings of those without kids went from 24% to 35%. Participants also reported gains in health and well-being. And I'll include these results as a reply to the space so people can actually read the report about that and learn more. And the other thing that I wanted to make sure and include in our news is that a lawsuit is going forward in Texas in order to cancel and prevent basic income pilots from happening there in Texas. And this is in spite of, or actually potentially because of, two successful pilots and its results already being published from both of those, which we have gone over in previous spaces as well. But just to give you an idea of what this lawsuit is about, this is what the Attorney General is doing. This is the press release from yesterday, actually. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has sued Harris County for instituting an unlawful guaranteed income program that redistributes public money in a manner that violates the Texas Constitution. Announced by Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo in 2023, the program would randomly select 1,928 eligible Harris County residents by lottery to receive $500 cash payments for 18 months with no strings attached. The money itself comes from the $20.5 million the county received through the 2021 American Rescue Plan, which was specifically intended to be used for COVID-19 relief initiatives. The program was met with additional backlash and was announced that certain classifications of non-citizens would be eligible for the handouts. The Texas Constitution expressly forbids, quote, any county, city, town, or other political corporation or subdivision of the state to grant public money or thing of value in aid of or to any individual. Harris County's program to give public money away with no conditions, no control over expenditure of that money, and no guarantee of public benefit is prohibited. The Constitution also provides that everyone has equal rights and no man or set of men is entitled to exclusive, separate public emoluments. This lottery-based handout violates the Texas Constitution because the selection of recipients is inherently arbitrary. County governments have limited authority to act, and like all governments can only act in accordance with the Constitution. Harris County has exceeded that authority. Quote, the scheme is plainly unconstitutional, said Attorney General Paxton. Taxpayer money must be spent lawfully and used to advance the public interest, not merely redistributed with no accountability or reasonable expectation of general benefit. I am suing to stop officials in Harris County from abusing public funds for political gain. So, yeah, that is what is going on there. I think one of the state representatives, I also kind of chuckle at him calling it, quote, lottery socialism. A lot of different of these Republican state house members in Texas have been coming up with some real gems. And as I've written about too, this is also part of like an overarching national strategy where bills are being proposed in state after state to try to prevent basic income pilots from happening. And Texas is not only one of those states, but they're also trying to sue from these to prevent any more pilots from happening. So yeah, that's the news. And Tom and Jessie, welcome to the space. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Conrad and Josh.
All right, so for everybody, let's just inform every listener about just what was going on, what was the Ontario pilot, and when was that, what happened?
So the Ontario pilot was an idea that was launched from our then Premier of Ontario. So that office is akin to the governor of a state. It was Kathleen Wynne at the time. And in the 2016 budget, her government decided to put forward a proposal to test out the idea of basic income. So between 2017 and 2018, the province of Ontario did test out basic income in 3 communities, in my city, my and Jessie's city of Hamilton, in Thunder Bay, which is in northern Ontario, kind of a resource-based city on the north tip of Lake Superior, and as well in a small rural community called Lindsay. And they were really trying to ask the question whether providing a cash transfer to low-income people in Ontario could improve health, support mental well-being, move people into the jobs of the future, help people maintain housing. And there were 4,000 people who were eventually selected. They were randomly selected to participate in the Ontario Basic Income Pilot. And those who were chosen could have received between $17,000 to $24,000 a year Canadian for the planned 3-year duration of the pilot. About half of those who volunteered to participate were on social assistance programs, what we call Ontario Works, or the Ontario Disability Support Program. And those familiar with at least Ontario's system know those rates are woefully inadequate. They don't help keep people housed or healthy, and it's really a very shoestring, substandard budget. A single person on Ontario Works gets $733 a month to live on. The average price of rent in our city right now is about $2,000. So no way you can make ends meet on that type of social assistance. Other participants, and maybe Jessie could talk a little bit about her experience in this. We're working. Many were working several part-time jobs or even full-time jobs trying to make ends meet, but they weren't earning enough at those jobs to pull themselves or their families out of poverty. They were our province's working poor. So the basic income pilot doubled incomes in many cases. We found very early on, and you and I had talked a lot about this, Scott, in those early days of the pilot. It was a transformational experience for people who signed up. People were eating better. They were able to stabilize their housing. They were feeling better, both physically and mentally. I think from my perspective, as somebody who's worked with people experiencing poverty for more than 20 years now, I really saw basic income as giving people the opportunity to dream again. People had given up hope about their future, and basic income provided a window in which people could imagine a better future for themselves and their families.
Yeah, and then so a lot of Americans don't know this story and don't know who replaced Kathleen Wynne, and like the story around both before and after the election. Could you tell people about Doug Ford?
Yeah, Doug Ford was the brother of former Toronto Mayor Rob Ford, who became infamous for a lot of different reasons. But Doug Ford was a populist. Got elected, barely by the skin of his teeth. And during the election, promised to keep the basic income pilot running. He said not once, not twice, but on 3 occasions during that election campaign, he wanted to see the results of the basic income trial, just see what the results showed. And yet, within a month of getting elected, he broke that campaign promise and broke the will, I think, of a lot of people who were on the pilot by suddenly announcing that they were going to do a 180. They weren't indeed going to keep the pilot running. They were going to cancel it, and it really threw the lives of the, I think, courageous basic income pilot participants, pioneers in many ways in terms of looking at social policy. It threw their lives into chaos. And really created a significant amount of despair amongst those individuals who had hoped that they would have the basic income pilot for at least 3 years and be able to turn their dreams into reality.
Yeah, and again, this was a 3-year pilot. This was 1 year into it. The costs was $50 million had been spent already. This is a total of $150 million pilot. And do you happen to remember even what was the excuse that the Ford administration said as to why they were canceling the pilot?
Well, depended on the day what the excuse might be. The first excuse was that it wasn't meeting the goals that it was initially set out. And then we reminded the government that they haven't actually sent out the surveys to the basic income pilot participants yet. The surveys were about to go out the door just as the pilot was canceled. The evaluation was canceled by the provincial government. And not only that, because this was an experiment in all regards affecting humans, there was also arm's length ethical review panel that was set up by the previous government to ensure that the pilot was run in an ethical way. The Ford government fired them too. So, multiple levels of reprehensible behavior, I think. soon after, they said that the pilot was going to be too expensive. It wouldn't be feasible to roll out. And because they hadn't gone forward with collecting the data, collecting the surveys from basic income pilot participants, we didn't at that time have the ability to just indicate how powerful it was. Luckily, we worked with a fantastic group of researchers at McMaster University here in Hamilton to survey more than 200 of those basic income pilot participants, and to a person. The reports back were that basic income was absolutely transformational. It was improving health. It was improving food security. It was helping people to feel better. There were fewer trips to the doctors. Even things like alcohol use and smoking had decreased for people who were receiving a basic income. And you may not necessarily think of that off the top of your head as being one of the outcomes of receiving a basic income. But I think when you have more agency in your life, you're feeling more in control of your life, then maybe you're not going to necessarily partake in some other habits that might not necessarily be bad for you. So there were a lot of really interesting findings from that report, Southern Ontario's Basic Income Experience, that showed basic income wasn't only working, it was helping people thrive.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the numbers here from the McMaster report too, and I'd like to just share these too for all the listeners to know, what Tom was talking about here, just how many, like just how effective this was, and also the fact that this was only managed to get, put together as data later after the fact, because the actual pilot, again, they only had baseline data from the actual pilot. So this was just an attempt to recover at least some data through surveys. So here are some numbers. Overall health improved for 79.4% of basic income participants. Mental health improved for 82.8% of them. 86.1% reported feeling less stress. 83.4% reported feeling less depressed. 78.4% reported feeling less angry. 86.2% reported a more positive outlook on life. 46% improved their housing situations. 59.7% were better able to pay off their debts. 65.7% reported an improvement in their family relationships. 78.9% responded to the survey with reports of greater motivation to find a better job. 61.5% found their basic income made it easier to look for jobs. 26.2% used their basic income to go back to school or retrain. Over 1/3 of the survey responding recipients used their basic income to find better jobs. And additionally, workplace conditions improved for 31% of them. 32.7% reported less need to see a doctor. 37.4% reported less need for ER visits. 82.7% reported being better able to afford medications. Dental care improved for 74.1% of them. 50.4% of respondents reported being more able to afford mental health services. 56.8% experienced less pain. 71.3% experienced feeling less tired. And as Tom mentioned, tobacco consumption decreased among users during the pilot, as over half the respondents reported either cutting down or quitting altogether. Basic income also reduced alcohol usage, with just under half the respondents cutting down or quitting altogether. And 73.7% reported becoming more physically active. 80.8% reported more self-confidence. Among parents, 68.8% reported improvements in their kids' well-being. 68.6% reported skipping fewer meals. 85.2% reported eating more fruits and vegetables. 86.2% reported maintaining a healthier diet. 83.9% relied less on friends and family for money. 75.3% reported being better prepared for emergencies. And getting around independently was made easier for 78.3% of respondents. 48.1% began volunteering more. And 74.4% spent more time in general socializing with friends, family, neighbors, and community members. There's even more numbers than this. I will post this thread too as we reply to the space here. But again, this is just like overwhelmingly positive. And also as a reminder too that the baseline data showed that 50% of the participants had some form of disability as well.
I think this is one of the things that's really interesting to me is the human nature type questions are the ones that these sort of limited pilots can really give us glimpses of. And there's so often we see people have these assumptions about human nature that humans are greedy, humans are lazy, humans are wanting, it's baked into our economics that humans like want to, amass as much stuff for as little effort as possible. And it's just a wild misunderstanding of humans. I think that the vices and addiction stuff is one of the most interesting to me, because a lot of people will assume someone who's addicted is like an addicted person. They are a person who addiction defines them, or it drives them, or it's who they are inherently, rather than it being a coping mechanism or like a way to check out from their circumstances. And what you find in all these pilots, and what we saw in our Bootstraps pilot and in general, is that when you give people sort of a light at the end of the tunnel and some ground to stand on, they, instead of looking for ways to check out of a life that they don't know how to live, they find ways to check back in.
Well, and also the statistics that you were reading, Scott, and I've read those statistics, they're stunning, huge positive returns. Like you can't ignore that. And it's stunning that people have been ignoring that.
Yeah, it really is. It just blew me away to read those, and those aren't the the only ones. There's been 3 different kind of rounds of surveys, each trying to get some data. And to be fair, this is respondent data, so it's unfortunate that it's not going out to every single person who is participating in the pilot. So I do expect it to be slightly better than it would otherwise be. Because of clearly people who are going to be responding are the ones who really felt a positive difference and stuff, but it still is just clear as day that this was having a hugely positive impact. It's just atrocious for so many reasons.
Yeah,
but what Ford did.
Yeah, and the human stories, as you've already inferred, really provided, I think, the bookends to the data sources as well. So the stuff that Jessie did in her engagement through the Humans of Basic Income project, I think absolutely encapsulated just how important basic income was for people restoring dignity and hope. And I love to read those sorts of statistics around renewed optimism, renewed engagement in society, because I really think, especially now, as we're looking at a multitude of problems facing us on the political level and social level, that basic income really can be a cure for a lot of those ills in society if we just have the courage to make it happen.
Yeah.
So Jessie, what was
These are the
your
ills
role?
that people.
I'm sorry. I was Jessie. Are you?
Sorry?
You were a participant, so you were an actual recipient of something. Okay.
Yes. Yes, I was. Yeah.
And does this? I guess would be good to just hear your experience, since we don't really know it. I think you may be the first actual recipient of basic income that we've had on here. Is that right, Scott?
Really?
It's possible.
Oh God!
So you got to tell the whole story.
Wow.
It's all on you.
Oh, no pressure. Um, well, okay. So like life before basic income was that like I'm an artist. That's my job in my life, and it's not like it's not just like a hobby of mine. I'm a pianist, I'm a photographer, and this is how I've paid the bills for most of my life. But like I've had like back at that point in time, I had 4 jobs, and I was basically cobbling together like an income, but all of those jobs were contract work, and the gig economy. And when you work as a contractor, you have no rights. Like you don't get employment insurance or health benefits, or like you could be fired in an instant and lose that contract, or they'll say, oh, we're not going to renew your contract, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it was also very precarious employment. A part of my story that I hadn't told up until just recently, and it's only because I've just kind of gotten the courage and just said, I don't care what anybody thinks, is that I was also like, I had just ended an abusive relationship with a financially and emotionally abusive relationship with someone who had also like just drained my savings and tanked my credit. So I was in this really precarious state working these terrible jobs to try and like cobble my life together and then also try and rebuild my savings and my credit. So when the basic income pilot happened, like I just remember I was just like aimlessly scrolling on social media, as we all do, and saw an article on, one of the article, any news place, I don't know. And I just thought, hey, that's cool. Like I qualify, why not? And I was talking to my roommate at the time. And so we were both like, hey, let's sign up. So we went to this information session. We filled out some forms. We had to submit like, some documents about like, our taxes and proof of income and stuff. And then my roommate found out first, which made me assume that I didn't get on the pilot. But then about maybe 2 or 3 weeks after she got her letter saying that she was on the pilot, I got a letter saying that I was on the pilot. The whole time I was working, I was teaching piano in a studio. And actually, I wanted to give a shout out to Patricia because my coworker from that time is in the audience. So, hey, Patricia. Hey, Pat. It's nice to see you. I was working. So I received, like, you could receive up to $1,400 a month if you were a single person. I believe that was the number. But if you were working, that amount would be subtracted by 50 cents a dollar. So I received about $700 a month. So it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it covered my rent. And that's like I remember that day, like I got the letter, I sort of thought, oh cool, I'm on the basic income pilot, I gotta go to work. So I went to went to one job, then I went to the other job, I went to the other job, like as I did every single day, and it was super exhausting. And it's the end of a long day, it's dark out, I'm driving home alone in my car, and I sort of thought about that letter that I hadn't had time to process. And I sort of thought to myself, oh my God, my rent is covered. And I just started sobbing in my car, tears of relief, like just sort of realizing like, oh my God, like I don't have to work 4 jobs anymore. So I dropped down a whole bunch of those jobs. I kept teaching piano, but I dropped down a bunch of other things, and I was focusing on building a business. It was actually a filmmaking business. And I was actually seeing it grow and seeing my photography business grow at the same time because I had more time and energy to put into it. And I wasn't scared of the financial risk of taking it because I had my rent being covered every month, no matter what. So I was seeing my business grow. I wrote out a business plan, and I predicted that I would have actually only been on the basic income pilot for 2 out of the 3 years it was supposed to run, because at that point I would have been making too much money. I wouldn't have qualified to be on the pilot anymore. I would have had paid staff. I would have been pulling in a 6-figure salary. I would have been paying taxes to the government, and it was going well. And then I heard about the cancellation, and I had never, and I have never been that angry in my entire life. And I like there's nothing that has made me more filled with rage than learning of that cancellation. So my portrait series is called Humans of Basic Income. It's on Google. I don't know, find it. It's around. But it was born out of rage. It was sort of this visceral reaction of like, I want everybody to know the names and the faces and the stories of the people that this government has just irrevocably harmed. And so I just like, that's how I met Tom. I started reaching out on social media, being like, I need to find people. Then Tom Cooper invited me to Queen's Park to like with a whole bunch of other basic income recipients to protest the cancellation and actually appear in the legislature. So we did that, and that's sort of where I started my series, and it sort of blew up from there. It really did. It went viral right away, and it's sort of taken over my life in this wonderful, wonderful way. So it's sort of it is the qualitative data. It is the source of the qualitative data for all the people. Like, it isn't like, X% of people. It is, this person has a name. This is what they were using it for. And I had this rare opportunity to travel all over Ontario to meet these other basic income recipients, learn their stories. And now I have this, like it's very valuable to me. I cherish it, their stories, and this responsibility to share these stories and make sure that people know what happened here and know who these people who were affected. And it's a responsibility I take extremely seriously, that they trusted me with this, and that I can use that now to continue to advocate. And that's what I have been doing for the last 6 years.
What?
And I don't plan on stopping until I don't need to talk about basic income anymore, because we all have a basic income.
What's the total number of portraits that you have at this point?
It's around 70
Nice. Yeah, 70
from
people, all for
basic income.
difference.
Yeah, from Lindsay, Thunder Bay, and Hamilton, Ontario, and then I also have other portraits of like people and politicians and who support basic income and why they support basic income. You can find all the portraits on my website, which is jessiegolem.com. And in there, it's my photography portfolio, but the Humans of Basic Income portrait series is on there.
Great. It looks like
I'm looking at it. This is nice. Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
is really something. Yeah, you
there
can
was
tell the
something-
whole story just with a picture and a sign. It's like, yeah, that's all you need.
There was
Yeah.
there was something you said that was interesting to me. It also seems like a good time to remind everyone in the space, since we're picking up a little steam, to please retweet and post this thread and get more people in here. There was something you said about how this pilot you were in actually had sort of a clawback mechanism, which is fairly rare in pilots, where the more money you made, the less you got in support. It was like, you said it was 50 cents on the dollar for every dollar, and that's a fairly high marginal tax rate. But one of the things that a lot of these pilots have inherent in them is that they're just targeted towards a very specifically low income demographic, and they're sort of simply like, everyone gets the same amount of money, and they're not really representing the effect of, like, as you make more money, more gets clawed back. Is that disincentivizing? To what degree? Can you talk about like how that affected your thinking and how it felt when you were doing the calculus of like, okay, if I get a job, I'm keeping half of the extra dollars I make versus 100% of the extra dollars I make versus, common welfare, which is much less of the extra dollars you make. Like, just what was that like as you described, like, building up a business? What was that like for you?
Well, I sort of saw it as an end goal. Like, I didn't want to be on the pilot forever. So I sort of saw like there's a motivation to keep working, and I want to keep working. I enjoy work, and enjoy like having something to do or a place to go and be at. So I didn't see it as a disincentive at all. And I sort of saw it as this like, I want to get off the pilot. I have this place. I have this cushion of this money that's coming in, and I am building my business. And then I sort of saw it as this way of like, the less basic income I'm receiving, the more my business is succeeding. And that was like this big motivating factor for me, that sort of, lit this fire in me to get this going. So it actually more incentivized me than anything. I thought about like, what it would be like to not work, and especially after the pilot, or after the portrait series got the exposure that it did. There were a lot of people that were like very opposed to basic income, and all of a sudden I'm the face of this movement, and they're sending me threatening messages or making really hateful comments on social media. And a lot of the language and the rhetoric was that, you're a parasite, you're a leech, you're leeching my hard-earned taxpayer money. And I just thought that language was interesting because it was inherently dehumanizing, like saying that I'm not a human, I'm a parasite. But then it also sort of assumes the worst in people, and assumes that like, if you're going to get a basic income, you're just going to sit around playing video games all day. And that's not how I saw it or how I felt it. I felt as like this was a motivating thing. You have this opportunity, take this opportunity and run with it. And it was like the opposite of what these people were assuming. And also, like, if I wanted to sit around playing video games all day, my quality of life wouldn't be very great. Like I like $700 a month or even $1,400 a month means that I can afford to live in my parents' basement and eat ramen all day. But that's about it. So I sort of thought like, I want to invest the money that I have been given into my business and see it grow. And that's what I would rather do. So even though there was that 50 cents a dollar cutoff, it had an opposite effect from what the prevailing assumption is.
It's still like when you look at, and it's good to see that even that big of a clawback still doesn't behave, at least for you and for a lot of people, as a disincentive. The way the welfare system works today is the clawback is greater than 100% for a lot of people, where it's like,
oh, yes.
you take work and it hurts you to take work, or you lose almost everything you're working for, and there's never a way to start building anything at the same time as you're risking your benefits that are like your qualification, your eligibility for those benefits. Have you ever, outside of the basic income pilot, have you ever had opportunity to experience other versions of welfare programs that behave differently?
The two that I could think of off the top of my head was right before the pandemic happened, and actually right before any of us were aware that we were about to enter into a pandemic. I was laid off from my job, so I had to go on to employment insurance, and I went on to that with the thought of, I have so much time to think about my career, think about what I want to do next, and think about the next steps. Not really, like, none of us were aware of we would all have more time than we anticipated. So I was on employment insurance for a few months, and then the pandemic happened, and I stayed on EI for a few months after that. But then after the EI was over, we were still in the middle of a pandemic. There were still no job opportunities to be had. So I transitioned into the Canada Emergency Relief Benefit, or CERB, which was $2,000 a month. So those were two programs that I used, and it all sort of happened in 2020, when we were at that point where those things were necessary.
I believe too the CERB had an interesting cutoff. It was $2,000 per month, but wasn't it like if you earned over $1,500 per month, then you lost the 2,000?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. I don't. Tom, maybe Tom might be able to speak to this, but off the top of my head, I don't remember if there was a specific cutoff for that, and what that looked like. Sorry.
That's okay. Tom, do you remember that?
I have to look this up.
Is Tom spicy tuna now?
Oh, No, Spicy Tuna is actually another participant. It looks like Tom, he's having some issues.
Mm.
Hi there, I'm
Oh,
here.
Spicy,
okay.
Spicy
Hi,
Tuna?
Scott.
Hi,
Hi,
hi.
hi,
Can we call
Jesse.
you?
Yes, I am another one that was receiving the basic income in Lindsay.
Oh, who is this?
I'm sorry, your whole conversation keeps breaking up, so I can't
Okay.
get your full sentences.
Okay.
I'm not sure why that's happening, but
Can you hear me, Spicy Tuna?
was this Scott?
This is Conrad, the one that's up there as the UBI guy.
Oh, okay. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Maybe I'll be interpreter for people who have questions. My first question is, who are you? Who's Spicy Tuna? If that's something you want to share. Jessie was trying to see if she knew you.
Yeah, not a problem. I was on the basic income in Lindsay. I'm a person with disabilities and have been for about 15 years on ODSP and CPP disability. But because ODSP claused that back, at the time it was $11.69 a month that we had to live on. At the time in Lindsay, I was renting a house. Is it okay if I just give a short excerpt on?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your story.
Okay. So I was renting a house and renting out rooms to try to make ends meet, and that wasn't working out due to just abhorrent people renting from me. So I ended up getting an eviction notice for non-payment of rent, and at that same time, the basic income came along. I couldn't find a place to rent, so I ended up in long-term motel. But basic income came along and I got it, and that paid the long-term motel room. I did have to give up 3 of my pets to live there. I was there about 4 months, and because of basic income, I started eating better, I started feeling better, and I secured a part-time job at Boston Pizza. So it added to my income, which was great. And I started paying down bills. I had 2 young children at the time that lived with their father in Peterborough. And I was able to secure a decent car where I could now get them on my weekends and just have a more stable relationship with my young kids. And sorry, this is a little hard, talking about having to give up my pets and everything due to
Awful.
poverty. And so
That.
anyway, I did eventually find a small 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Lindsay, and basic income was, covering the rent, and I worked part-time. I was feeling pretty good mentally. I do suffer from depression and anxiety. While on basic income, I only saw my doctor maybe twice because things were looking up and things were going well. And like I said, I got my credit cards paid down. I got my bills caught up. I was able to get a decent car so I could see my kids more often because they did live in another city. And I had no sooner got that apartment than that Doug Ford decided to cancel this program. I do live in Ontario, and we now call it Ontariable under Doug Ford's mismanagement. He threw me right back into poverty with ODS poverty, as we call it. I had to give up my apartment and then start looking for a room to rent because I just couldn't afford rent anywhere. Obviously, on that $11.69 a month. So I headed to Peterborough, where my kids live, just to be closer to them, and I rented in student housing. And I was 57 years old at the time, and student housing really isn't a place for someone my age, but that's all I could find. It was horrible, to say the least. And my journey started then on just looking for a decent room to rent because I couldn't afford my own place. And I had to find a room that my children could also come and visit. There was no longer overnight stays or anything, obviously. And I was physically assaulted by 2 landlords. The last landlord stole everything I owned in my entire life. He stole it all, and that's still before the courts, but that's another story. Everything I ever owned, he stole from me. And it just sent me back into a life of despair with the cancellation of this. I was thriving, my kids were thriving, and I mean, as Jessie said, it was devastating to us that we finally had a hope of a future and a decent life. And Doug Ford just callously took it away. And that's part from Lisa McLeod, too, who, with no data whatsoever in, said that the basic income pilot was not working. And that's a lie. It's a total lie. And the
How
MP
much
at the
more were
time,
you expecting? How much longer were you supposed to be getting it that everyone was planning on?
I just had it for the year. There was 2 more years to go, and here I took out a car loan, and now I was stuck with car loans on ODSP. Our MP at the time, Laurie Scott in Lindsay, just vanished. She went into hiding and wouldn't confront us in our demonstration saying, don't cancel this. She completely went into hiding and wouldn't respond to anybody. So it was devastating that, I went back to looking for a room to rent, giving up my apartment. And my health started to really deteriorate again, and using my credit card to live. And here in Peterborough, the winter of 2020, I was homeless and lived in my car in a storage unit, which was frightening in itself, being someone almost 60 years old, and no place if my kids wanted to visit. No, I'm not bringing them to my storage unit or sitting in my car. So, Doug Ford we have 3 levels of government in Canada, and all of them are ableists that will not take disability poverty seriously. They don't care. That's why we're waiting 4 years for the Canada Disability Benefit. And it's thrown so many of us into extreme poverty and just trying to survive, when that basic income pilot made me thrive in every sense of the word. I heard your statistics, and I fell into every one of those, that life was better and it gave meaning, and I wanted to work more, and I'd love to see my bank account grow from working. And now there's just this sense of despair, and why bother going on, and what's the point of struggling like this on a day-to-day basis, just trying to make ends meet.
So when people like to say that basic income like robs people of purpose and meaning, you would have something to say about that?
Absolutely. Like I said, when I started getting it, I got healthier and I was able to secure a part-time job. And I loved going to work. Even, it was delivery and working in the kitchen at Boston Pizza, but I loved doing it. It was something to look forward to, and also watch. Besides your basic income, you watch your bank account grow and you pay your bills off, and you're not in such distress every day. That, it just, and the kids saw the difference, that mom was finally happier. And I don't know if people realize when you're on ODSP that you can't have a birthday. You can't buy Christmas presents. You can't go on a day trip. You can't do anything with your children. But I was able to do that So not just me thriving, but my children also got the benefits of this. And I think that's inherently important, that it helped not me, but my children too. And when Doug Ford stripped that all away from me, they saw me go downhill again. Like, seriously. And
That's the next.
I did overdose
Yeah.
one night. I had just given up. I gave up on the struggle of trying to survive on ODSP, and it's just impossible. And I might mention that I did qualify for CERB when it came out. It took 5 months of fighting with the CRA to get it, because I was pizza delivery, and I kept a detailed list of my income. It took 5 months, but I finally got it. And I turned that money around and helped with crowdfunding on Twitter with people that needed help. So I paid it forward when I got it. So, I mean, there's no disputing that basic income is the way forward. I mean, we're talking about in Canada, $80 billion a year is spent on poverty.
Mm-hmm.
The Canada Disability wouldn't even come close to that. Helping others, giving a hand up is nowhere as close to that, but our governments just refuse to see the light.
Yeah, the if the pilot were to be a full, program for everybody, then it would cost $87 billion per year. Cost of poverty is $84 billion per year. Of course, it dramatically reduced poverty. Net cost is somewhere around $40 billion per year after the reduced costs of poverty. And also it would grow the economy by $80 billion per year. So then, of course, you're also getting, you're seeing more taxes as a result of the economic growth, and everybody is also better off from the economic growth as well. So I mean,
I'm getting really tired of the stigma that if people are given a basic income that they become lazy. They do not, and I'm proof of that. That I could finally go out and work and contribute to the economy. Everything I make is going right back into the economy. We're not sitting at home collecting it and not spending it. It's all going right back into the economy.
It's also very interesting around the way disability is generally designed, and I don't know how similar it is in Canada to the U.S., but there's a lot of people with disability who do have the ability to work in certain ways at certain times, and they want to. And the way we set up disability in the U.S. is you have to basically hide in a cave and pretend like you actually haven't worked, because you'll lose it if they catch you working.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just absurd.
Yeah, like I can work sporadically. I do Instacart on the days that I feel I'm okay. And like arthritis in the foot, some days I can't work because I can't walk. But I do my best to bring in an income. But the stigma around disability is just off the charts in Canada. We are vilified. We are called lazy. We're called sponging off the system. And it's crazy on X how many people out there are totally just saying that everybody on disability are liars and we shouldn't get anything and we get too much. And, it's just off the charts. So,
thank
and
you
our
for
governments are fueling that.
Do you know? I mean, this is next level despicable. Like, not helping people to begin with is awful, but getting people to commit and plan and really put their faith into something and make plans, like you and Jessie both described, and then taking it away is just beyond reprehensible. I feel like, do you guys know, like, what's the status on? Scott, you said before there was a class action in the works, right?
Yeah.
How's that going?
Yeah, we're riled up.
We have our fingers crossed for this because it's moving forward.
Tom, do you want to give the history of the lawsuit? I know it's been taking a while. It's been years, but some it's finally going
Well,
forward.
that's our court systems, right? It takes several years.
Yeah, there's a group of four incredibly courageous representative plaintiffs in Lindsay who worked with a good friend of ours, Mike Perry, initially to put this in motion. They asked for a judicial review, and you're right. The court system in Canada, like in the U.S., moves way too slowly. But fortunately, a terrific firm based out of Toronto, Cavaluzzo, has taken up the cause. They have taken on this class action with fervor.
They are awesome.
Yeah, and I can't say enough about them and about their passion on behalf of the basic income pilot participants. And they've moved things forward. And so just recently, the court certified that a class action can move forward. And hopefully it won't take another 5 years. But it looks as though the basic income pilot participants will get their day in court one way or the other. And hopefully they will get some compensation, because people signed on to the basic income pilot in good faith, thinking it was going to last 3 years. This was, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, but in my opinion, certainly a breach of contract, because the people I talked to who were interested in signing up for the basic income pilot really wanted to know what all the ramifications were. Would it be there for the entire 3 years? And provincial government representatives at the time said, yes, it's definitely running for all 3 years. Sign here, and you can certainly be assured that you will have that long runway of being able to plan for your future. And
remember that Doug Ford did promise not to cancel it. On his platform, he said, no, we will let it run for the 3 years. We'll get the data and see how it's going. And he broke his promise, as usual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So hopefully we will see something resolved in the next little while. It may take a couple more years, I'm not sure, but I think given the incredible trauma that many of the basic income pilot participants went through with the cancellation, some are no longer with us, sadly. And my thoughts are to our friend Michael Hampson, who, Scott, you met when you came to Hamilton at the Basic Income Guarantee Forum, North American Basic Income Guarantee Forum in 2018. He was somebody full of passion who himself he was confined to a wheelchair and had significant disability, but really felt that basic income could help him in a multitude of ways. And he talked about that at that conference. And sadly, shortly after the basic income pilot was canceled by the Ford government, he passed away. And so folks like Michael won't be able to see the results of this class action, but many others will, and hopefully will receive some compensation for the extreme trauma they had to go through.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd like to ask Mitchell, I know you're listening. He's ODS4 on Twitter, on X. Mitchell, do you want to chime in at all here? Because you are one of our biggest advocates. I got so much respect for you, and I'd like to hear from you on this, if you can chime in.
What's his... Oh, there, I see it. Okay, I'll invite him to speak. And
he's done several interviews trying to get the word out, and he's one of our biggest advocates.
Mitchell who?
Tremblay.
Hi,
Mitchell. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for hosting this and all that you guys do. I follow a bunch of you. I don't really have much spicy tuna on this because, I mean, you were a participant and so is Jessie Golem there, which I did see your website, beautiful portraits, really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
The one thing that I would say that has to do with basic income that I dealt with recently was when I sat down last week with Elizabeth May, the federal Green Party leader, and asked her some direct questions on behalf of the disability community. And we did start talking about basic income. I firmly believe it's part of a three-tier system that we need, which is a national disability insurance plan, so that covers youth and seniors, the Canadian Disability Benefit, and then some type of a basic income, GLBI, UBI, something like that. But I'll leave this to the experts because this is their space. But I love hearing your story, Spicy and Jessie, and I'm looking to be informed by this space.
Thank you so much, Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mitchell.
We were talking about the lawsuit. I want to get back to that topic.
Yeah, please. And also, I want to add to this topic too that I get the numbers, since you haven't mentioned that. This is a $200 million lawsuit. And again, the pilot would have been $150 million in total. And they stopped it after $50 million on the pretense of saving money. So I do think that it would be kind of delicious for them to end up paying more than they would have in the attempt to save money, because that is so indicative of not wanting to spend money on poverty elimination too, is this belief that you're somehow going to come out ahead by doing that. And of course, you just end up spending far more down the line.
That's how a civil suit should always work, is, you should pay the damages plus the extra accounting for suffering and things like that. And it's the only way it should be done, in my opinion.
This is one of the issues with the Ford government, that he continually runs a province where he thinks he can get away with everything with no repercussions whatsoever. So I know that I probably speak for all 4,000 recipients of this, that we signed a contract. He just said, no, not doing it. And he needs to be held accountable for this, because he's very rarely held accountable for anything. So this would be a really, really nice win if we can do this and say to him, you can't keep running this province the way you're running it, and just upheave everybody's lifestyle that's involved, and just say, oh, I don't care. And that's what he does.
I think you're preaching to the choir here. I think nobody's disagreeing with you. Everybody feels the exact same way that you do, but we would like to hear some more details about what the next steps are and what this lawsuit entails, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Sorry, I just I know what you're saying, and I totally 100% agree with you. There's things I want to hear. I want to talk about.
The stories are pretty. They're pretty intense, and that is what it's all about. So a question I had is, the money came from somewhere. It had been set aside for this program, and
yes,
it was sitting there. I mean, it wouldn't have been promised if it hadn't already been set aside. Do we know what became of that money? Does anybody?
So that's actually a great question that we don't have an answer for, because obviously there would have been more upfront costs to setting up the pilot project, holding the initial consultations, development of the plan and proposal. But yeah, what became of the sort of second half of the funds? I assume it just went back into general revenue at some point. One of the ironic twists to this whole saga was, at the time, the Ford government, one of the reasons it was running as a populist campaign, was also advertising the idea of selling $1 beer in Ontario.
That's what I was going to I was going to say the same thing.
Right?
As it where did the money go? It went to subsidized beer.
It's such a collective insult to all of the people of Ontario that he got in on buck a beer, on cheap beer. It's such an insult to the intelligence of the people who live in this province. That's how I found his whole platform insulting.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with it, but it sounds horrible. But the yeah, I mean,
it's barely a platform.
This a little bit in like Texas also, where people are being like, you're saying that like having this guaranteed income program is sort of like a way of buying votes, right? And if it does seem like, isn't that a great way to get elected? To say we are setting aside money for people that need it, and so it just is very hard to wrap your head around that it wouldn't be seen as a good a good platform. But I guess he was running on the platform of keeping it, and then just decided no. Yeah, that's infuriating.
Yeah, exactly. One of the arguments that often gets lost in it is really the economic return on investment as well. We know, particularly in Lindsay, which was more of a saturation site for the basic income pilot, all the indications were that small businesses were seeing a lot of growth in that community. There were indications that certainly the economic return on investment was very real. You wouldn't have been able to see that as much in our city of Hamilton, because we're a city of about 500,000 people, and only 1,000 people were receiving the basic income. But it had such an impact that both the Chamber of Commerce in Hamilton and the Chamber of Commerce in Thunder Bay, the other pilot site, really wanted to see it move forward. So when it was canceled, they advocated with the provincial and the federal government to try to keep it running again. They even took it a step further a couple years later at their national conference, and this includes more than 200,000 small business representatives across the country. They passed a resolution to have the federal government consider basic income in their policy platform. So the argument that this costs too much money just didn't hold water with those who knew the economic system the best. And we could see, small businesses were behind the idea of basic income. Certainly the healthcare sector was. They recognized that when people were earning a basic income, they're far more likely to have healthier outcomes. As a matter of fact, this is a side story, but I needed to go to an emergency room a couple of weeks ago with my son, and we knew we were going to be a while, so I brought my laptop with me, which has a big basic income sticker on the back of it. One of the nurses saw that sticker and said, "Hey, basic income. If we had that here, half of the patients in the emergency room wouldn't be visiting us." So I think people get it. Certainly people who work directly on the front lines in the economy, in the healthcare sector, in social services, they get it. It's just being able to encourage and convince others, particularly politicians, to open their minds.
That was one of the most powerful things I ever heard in an interview with somebody who said that she'd spoken to doctors in Canada, and like in the U.S., some of us are very jealous of your universal healthcare system. And this person had said that she'd interviewed a lot of doctors, and roundly they're like, "Yeah, it's better to work in this system than in the U.S., but still, well, I wish I could just prescribe a lot of my patients cash, because cash is the best preventative medicine."
Yeah. You're probably referring to Dr. Danielle Martin, who's been an incredible advocate on that front. And certainly I see basic income as being as important in the 21st century as the development of Medicare was to Canada in the 20th century. It has the opportunity to be just that powerful.
Yeah, I was really interested, especially in the Lindsay result, just because it was a saturation site, and there needs to be more saturation sites. Those seem to be where the most impressive results happen, when you see that an entire society is getting this. I know one of the things that stuck with me as just a purely an anecdotal observation from Lindsay was how, like, during the time that the pilot was operational, that women's shelters were like practically empty, and I wonder if there was the same kind of anecdotal observation from those same kind of places as you were, like some kind of urgent care or any kind of hospital care, where people are like, "Oh, there's just fewer people around." That's that's nice.
Yeah. Unfortunately, again, because Lindsay was the saturation site, and the other two communities where basic income was tried were much larger population bases, we weren't able to ascertain exactly what some of those impacts were. But Jesse mentioned it a little while ago that a few years after the basic income pilot was canceled, we ran into the pandemic, and in Canada, government needed who had suddenly lost income. There were 8 million Canadians who were suddenly out of work, and they were terrified about what the future would hold for them during that very anxious time. And so CERB came in, the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, and it was providing $2,000 a month. Although, it certainly wasn't perfect. It wasn't quite a basic income, but I think there were certainly lessons to be learned there. And even while people were receiving CERB, those indicators that people were spending more in local economies, that there were far fewer defaults on mortgages, that sort of thing could not be disputed. And so again, I think we have to look at basic income as not only a cost savings overall, but really an investment in our collective future.
Yeah, collective investment with huge returns, and again, it's something that you've witnessed there in Canada as well with the Canadian Child Benefit, where that there's a big return on that investment. That $1 to these children and the families ends up growing the Canadian economy by $2. And multiple studies have been done in the U.S. around this too, to try to figure out just how much of a return you can get by just reducing child poverty. And I've seen multiple studies, and the bigger one, just for children in general, is 10-1. And I can't remember there's another one that looked at just like those under 5, and it was something like I think it was almost 30-1. But just over and over again, you see these studies, and child poverty is hugely expensive. I don't know what I know that in Canada, what the stat for the cost of all poverty is, was it like 80 or 90 billion?
80 billion.
80 billion.
And in the U.S., it's $1 trillion, over $1 trillion per year on child poverty alone, not just for all poverty. So it's even more than that. But it's just it's so expensive to just essentially burn these piles of money on the hill of poverty instead of actually investing in every single individual.
And Scott, I just want to make a comment on what Tom had said about the in Lindsay, the women's shelters being almost empty during the time of basic income. That in itself says that it's working, that these women no longer had to rely on their abusive husband's income, that they had income to leave their abusive relationships, not stuck there.
Yeah, in the Dolphin pilot too, back in the 70s, it was a 37% reduction in domestic violence. And of course, this has been seen in other pilots as well. And yeah, this is two different mechanisms where on the one hand, the abused are more able to actually flee and completely exit those relationships. And also just the ability to exit those relationships actually can change the way that they are treated by their abusers, and both of those so important.
And I want to point out that we have someone on X that her and her husband, she's on ODSP. He just got his CPP and old age pension, so her ODSP dropped down to $4 a month. $4 a month. Because he gets old age pension now. That leaves her with no money of her own, none, if she needed to leave or, for whatever reason. A basic income would say, if you're in a bad relationship, you now have money and you can leave if you want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a thing I thought about a lot, especially because I was in a bad relationship and it took me 6 months to save up the money to leave him. Yeah. And that's and We didn't have children, and like the stakes were pretty low for me, but it still took 6 months. So what is it like when you have children, or you maybe own a house together or something like that, where the stakes are higher and the
Yeah.
assets are bigger?
But imagine this woman now being given $4 a month for disability and having to rely totally on her husband's old age pension, and that's it.
No. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
she's stuck there, stuck.
That is definitely that's another detail of existing disability supports, and even that can be the case with just traditional welfare benefits in general. It's one of those details a lot of people don't know, is that it's when you target households instead of individuals in the households that the income of a partner can change the entire calculation for the household.
Yeah.
And the ramifications of that is, as you described, where someone that has some significant amount of benefit can see it disappear because of their partner.
Yeah, we call it marriage inequality, and it's not right that just because one person has turned 65, the other person loses all their support. And it leaves them very vulnerable because they don't have any income of their own, right? So now they're stuck. Now, if a basic income come in, she would have her own income to at least help her along.
Yeah, and the fact that it's always there. So when it's individual, then the income is going to each person's bank account as an individual. And they can leave at any point. As soon as you target household, then someone could say, oh, well, if they left the household, then they could get their own. But of course, there's there's a giant gap there. There's the bureaucracy of that. There's the reality of the administration. There's the amount of time that takes, and there's, of course, it's just a difference in this feeling of power. There's a difference between having something already in your bank account and maybe having something at some point in the future.
Yeah. But old age pension is designed.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Conrad.
Sorry.
Can you hear me? I had to step out for a second because of audio issues.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you said this while I was fighting with X, but there was a stunning statistic we looked up for our docuseries. We have one of our stories has to do with domestic violence, and something like 99% of domestic violence cases involve financial abuse. It's just like almost every single time the woman stays because she can't afford to leave. Like, she wouldn't stay if she could.
Yeah.
If she could leave. Which that was pretty eye-opening to me, just the stark degree to which empowering individuals is important, and it's something that's been lacking in a lot of the pilots that have been running around the country. Was the Canadian pilot, the Ontario pilot, was that per individual or per household, or how was that set up?
It could have been for both individual and household. Like there was a different amount of money if you were a family unit or if you were an individual, and also there was a different amount if you were on like Ontario Disability Support or one of the existing welfare programs in Ontario. I don't remember the exact numbers.
But was it sent to suit two separate people in the household, or was it all sent in one lump sum to a head of household?
I believe it would have been sent in one lump sum to whatever the primary account would have been for that household. I don't know though, because like for me, I was single at the time. So it was just an individual amount for me. Like my roommate and I, despite having the same address, got different amounts of basic income and did not share our accounts because we weren't cohabiting.
I believe it was definitely one of the household, because even you couldn't separate it out because like the amounts were different. Like it was one of those systems where what was it, like $1,700 per month for for one person. Then if there was someone else in the household, then that was like an additional $1,200 or $1,300 or whatever the reduced amount was for the second individual. In which case you'd have people arguing over who was the primary and who was the secondary or something, if they were individual payments to individual accounts. So I think just in the structure of it, it had to have been just one payment for the household.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One of the other interesting pieces of the Ontario pilot we didn't mention was there was an additional supplement for individuals who were on the pilot who had a disability, and so typically individuals would receive around $1,400 a month on the pilot. If you had a disability, you got $500 in addition, recognizing there are extra costs to having a disability. So that brought it up to $1,900 a month, and came pretty close to what the federal government recognized Canadians needed during the pandemic, $2,000. But
Yeah.
I think as we move forward in Canada, looking at the development of a national Canada disability benefit, I think that's an interesting benchmark. But certainly recognizing that prices have skyrocketed over the last couple of years since the pandemic, especially for housing. We've seen monumental increases in rents, particularly in certain communities in Canada around Toronto and Hamilton and Vancouver. And so if we're looking at developing that benchmark for what a basic income needs to be, probably somewhere in the range of $2,500 would make sense these days.
I remember I'm glad that you brought up the additional amount for those with disabilities, because that too was a nice, I think, innovation of the pilot, and something that you just don't see in other places. And I remember at the time seeing even people who were heavily involved in disability community that were actually very against the pilot, despite the fact that it had this additional amount, and claiming that it was screwing over people with disabilities and all that. Do you want to just mention even what they were claiming?
Yeah, and there were honestly some legitimate concerns. Depending on what kind of special supports individuals received on disability, it may not have been the best economic decision for individuals to jump on the pilot. For example, I think of our good friend Jessie and my good friend Lance. He
Yes.
was saying this, but Lance has a prosthetic leg. He recognized if he needed to get that prosthetic replaced at some point during the pilot, that would have to come out of his basic income. Whereas if he had remained on the Ontario Disability Support Program, that would have been completely covered. So there were certainly balancing decisions made. Lance decided it was worth it for him to go on the basic income, and he certainly never regretted it, at least until the political cancellation of it. But individuals, I think, had to look at the situation for themselves. I think if we're looking at moving forward on a national level and adopting a universal basic income, we also have to ensure that there are other programs in existence. Basic income can't be a choice of this or that. I think we really need, a national pharmacare program, for example. We need to ensure that there are adequate housing protections for vulnerable tenants, because if everybody's receiving a basic income and there's no rent controls, then what's to stop landlords from just bumping up rent to whatever they think they can get in the market, which is pretty much the case now. So I think there are choices that need to be made, but having seen what I've seen, basic income as a financial foundation for people will help people thrive.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that basic income is the silver bullet be all end all solution, but is definitely one very large piece in the whole puzzle of all of how do we solve these crises and this this new world that it's forcing itself upon us, both by our own volition and by the effects of everything that is happening.
Yeah, one of the reason the Income Support All Foundation, it has its name, is because we wanted to even shorten it down to ITSA Foundation, and the reason behind that too is that it's just the constant reply that I have to what is basic income. It's a foundation, and I just try to hammer that home all the time, that we're not talking about getting rid of like everything. We're not saying that it's a silver bullet that will solve everything. It's just that it's a foundation, and if you want to build something, it needs a foundation. You can't build on sand. You need a firm, solid foundation. And all of these other programs, they can be the walls, they can be the wiring and the plumbing, but you can't build a house that's not going to fall without a foundation. And that's, I think, what we're witnessing. I think we're witnessing these crumbling building structures that were built on sand essentially, and I think that's one of the reasons.
I'd like to chime in on this just a bit. When I was on the basic income, I had gone to an appointment and there was a gentleman there in a wheelchair, and I asked him if he had applied for the basic income, and he was on ODSP, but he said, I can't because I have too many medications that won't be covered basic income, and it would just eat up whatever the basic income was. So if he stayed on ODSP, a lot of his drugs would be covered. So as Jessie said, and as Scott said, this isn't the silver bullet that's going to fix everything, especially for people on disabilities. I mean, if you're spending your whole basic income on drugs, what's the point, right? And that's what this guy felt. Well, what's the point in going on it if I have to pay for all my drugs now? And drugs are expensive for many people.
This is probably a whole separate side discussion, but Tom, do you happen to know just like why is it that Canada has a universal healthcare system but no like pharmacare system yet? Why is that being so challenging? And of course,
right?
We do, but we don't.
Story we all just sort of
we do, but we don't.
It's like it's universal healthcare, but it's also like pharmacare is not covered. Neither is dental care, and neither is eye care. Which are all of these things are so significantly important to
you don't really
healthcare.
need eyes and teeth, do you? As long as you got your hands, you're good to go.
Sure, I'll just be blind and eat smoothies all day.
Just your hard-working hands and some elbow grease.
Right. Oh God.
There again, we go back to the economic argument, and there's certainly a case for saying that dental care and pharmacare and vision care need to be included because that needing to not be able to afford a root canal and then getting an infection and having to spend time in the emergency room is costing society as well as that individual, of course, far more than prevention would have. And so, this has to be part of the larger solution. But I agree completely with basic income as the foundation.
Some of the most touching stories that I've heard actually have to do with teeth. Like it's in America too. It's even if you have insurance, it's like, oh, but we don't cover your dental. They just see your eyes and your teeth as extraneous. And when it comes to teeth, that's such a stigmatizing, important part of you. It's your smile. You can't present in the world the way you need to present and feel good about yourself. And if you can't, you open your mouth and smile at somebody without, feeling ashamed of it or, just being.
We have a couple people on X that their teeth are so rotted and so in disrepair that they can't eat anything besides soup. And on ODSP, there's very few dentists that will even take somebody on ODSP because they're just not being paid by the government properly. So they're turned down every turn they go to and can't get proper dental care. And then when the federal government brought in this dental care plan, They left out most of the people with disabilities. You have to have the disability tax credit to be able to be covered by this new dental program. And most people cannot get it because it's very, very hard to get. And you have to pay a doctor up to $200 to fill out the forms to try to get the disability tax credit. So you can get that dental help.
It's yeah.
Jessie, I would love to hear some more of this. Some of the stories that you took the portraits of. Would you happen to have any from memory that you would like to share of the stories of other pilot participants, or did you even want to bring it up
Yes.
on your computer? Maybe you can just read through some. Either one, I think, would be great to be able to include some more stories from the pilot.
Yeah. So I just went on my website and yeah, it's just jessiegolem.com/humans of basic income. Um the first portrait is of like a woman with curly red hair wearing a pink dress saying, "BI alleviated my stress when my income wasn't enough each month. I'm precariously employed. I'm a full-time student and beginning manual therapist in my community." Her name is Sarah. She's a good friend of mine. I've known Sarah for about 12 years now. She's one of the first people I met when I moved to Hamilton. And she's a lovely, lovely person. She's when she was on basic income, she was going to school. She was like she was working at a bar. And so she would be like up until 3 a.m. at this bar, and it was a sketchy bar. Like it was one of those places where like the police would be called often. So she would be up late at this bar every night and then waking up every single morning early to go to school. She's doing well right now. She owns her own business and she's an osteopath. And she works downtown. And I actually go to her and use her services. She's doing really, really well. But if it wasn't for basic income, she wouldn't be. The next person is a woman with a dog, and she's wearing a green coat and a pink shirt, and it says, "Basic income means I can pay my guide dog's medical bills. ODSP does not have a drug plan for service animals. $250 a month for meds, never mind vet costs." The option was to give her back, and the school would adopt her out. Basic income has allowed me to keep her in my independence. Her name is Tessa, and she's blind. So that dog is her guide dog. It is her way to be able to live and to have an independent life. I don't know how Tessa is doing. She lives in Thunder Bay, and this portrait was taken 6 years ago. So I honestly don't know if she's doing okay or not, if her dog is alive or not. I really don't know. But that story really stuck out to me. A couple of portraits down is a couple. It's a man and a woman and a little girl. The woman is pregnant. The basic income program helped us move to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood and feel financially secure enough to go back to school to get a better job. That's Dan and Justine. The little girl's name is Julia, who's now a teenager, and the baby is Orion, who is now 5 years old. When they were on basic income, like before that, they lived together in a place that was just like their daughter wasn't allowed to play outside because the backyard was an alleyway where there was a lot of like drug dealing, gang activity. Just it was very unsafe. So they never let her play outside. They used basic income to move into a better apartment. How they're doing right now is that Dan and Justine have separated, and Dan has moved out of Hamilton. Justine is still living in Hamilton, and I believe they share custody of their son Orion. The next one is basic income helps me stay healthy with good food. I am ill. It's held by a portrait of a man with long hair, wearing a hat and wearing a shirt that says, "Well, walk in someone else's shoes." That's my friend Tim Button. I love Tim. He used basic income to visit his family. He lives in Hamilton, but his family all lives up north in Timmins. So he was able to use basic income to see his family for the first time in many, many, many years and spend Christmas with them, and be able to like buy Christmas gifts for his nieces and nephews. He's doing okay. He's living in government housing or subsidized housing. He has cancer, but he's doing well, despite all of that. there's so many other stories that I could talk about. Just kind of just scrolling through them. Like I'm thinking about Michael, and who died. There's so many people, and yeah. So some people are doing good, some people are not doing good. It's just it's been crazy to see like what the impacts have been, especially now, 5-6 years later.
Tom, since you did mention Michael already, and Jesse just mentioned him again, I feel that it'd be great to have a voice for a voice who's no longer with us. Could you just share some more about Michael and what was his experience? What was he doing before the Basic pilot,
Sure.
and then how how he was faring during the pilot?
Can I share this? Yeah. And if Tom, you want to add to this, please. I'm looking at his portrait right now. So the portrait is taken in the background. There's flowers. Michael is sitting in a wheelchair, an electric one. His sign says Michael Hampson on basic income since January 2018. It changed my life, gave me back my dignity and faith in my community. ODSP chained me in poverty, causing high stress and poor nutritional opportunities. Basic income isn't. It isn't basic. It is many layered, and healing for us recipients in our community. Stand with us. And this was one of the very few portraits where the person in the portrait was smiling. Michael smiled in his portrait. And I remember that stuck out to me. And because like everybody else is pissed off, rightfully so, and they look angry, and he doesn't. And I actually asked him about that. And he didn't have a clear answer, but he sort of just held this like quiet, optimistic hope that no matter what happened, it was going to be okay. And I remember that. And in the picture, he looks good. Like he's clean, his hair is nice, he's wearing new clothing, he's looking really healthy and happy and good. And like one of the most traumatizing things for me with the cancellation of the pilot was witnessing a physical transformation of seeing these people that I've grown to love very deeply and care about descending into poverty. So the last time I saw Michael, like he did not look good. Like his hair was long and scraggly. He did not look healthy. His clothes were old. He did not look good. And I was extremely worried about him when I saw him. He looked very stressed and depressed and just not doing well. And then about a month after I saw him, I got the news that he had died. And that was really traumatizing to see that, and it is literally because of the cancellation, the basic, like he would still be here. He'd probably be on this space talking with us now if that pilot didn't get canceled. And the stress of going into poverty is just too much. I don't know if you want to say anything more to that, Tom.
No, I think that certainly covers it. One of the things we did do following the pilot cancellation, working with a terrific group of filmmakers through Powerline Studios here in Ontario, was try to capture some of those stories so that they could be shared with others. So the mini documentary, it's only about 17 minutes long, is kind of focused around Jesse's Humans of Basic Income project. The film itself is called A Human Picture. And they interview Jessie and Tim, who Jessie mentioned, as well as Tessa up in Thunder Bay, and Rhonda Castillo, who is a newcomer to Hamilton about 20 years ago. Another incredible story, a personal support worker who got injured on the job and then had to go on assistance, and she use basic income really as an opportunity again to try to upgrade her opportunities to get back in working in the care professions, because that's what she wanted to do. But the film actually is dedicated to two people. So one is Michael Hampson, and certainly Jesse outlined his story and his passion. He had always been an incredible advocate for justice in our community, and when he got on the basic income pilot, we really saw a transformation in him. The other person the film is dedicated to is former Canadian Senator Hugh Segal. Now, Hugh is actually a conservative, although here in Canada we'd probably call him a red Tory. But Hugh was one of the really a lifelong stalwart supporter of basic income, and he encouraged the provincial government to get behind the idea of the pilot. He helped develop the framework for the pilot, and as a senator, as a former chief of staff to our prime minister up in Ottawa, he really spoke out on basic income. And sadly, we lost Hugh just last fall. So he's the other person this little film, A Human Picture, is dedicated to. And if you'd like to learn more about it, just Google it, ahumanpicture.com, and you'll be able to see a little bit more about some of those stories and how it focuses around Jessie's Humans of Basic Income project.
Is that available on YouTube too? Is it like a rental situation, or is it only on the website?
We're making it available to community groups who want to screen it just for a modest cost, so we can recoup some of the costs. But certainly if folks want to take a look at the trailer and then reach out to us through the website, we'll certainly make it available to community groups.
Yeah, we would love that.
Great. We'll have to link that as a reply to this space too.
Yeah, just put it up.
Right.
Cool.
You know, and just I want to, since we're focused so much on like the real stories in this space, I just want to mention again too that one of the ones that I definitely remember that is one that you mentioned to Jessie, which is, you know, the one with the seeing eye dog, you know, like being able to like, I think that's a good example that gets people think, because you can have all kinds of different programs, you know, and is there a program in, you know, how many countries have programs where there's some kind of like pet assistance or something where, you know, you're able to like cover vet bills or pay for dog food and, you know, these kinds of things. Like it's really difficult to even ever pass these things, something like that, because again, you know, what about people, and like how are you supposed to, you know, like help like with covered dog food or something when you've got people who aren't even getting any assistance at all. And so when you have something like basic income, then you're able to cover like all these things that are just not part of any kind of, you know, whole system. Like it's just, there's so many ways for someone to spend money that are best for them that the government does not recognize and is probably likely never going to recognize.
And pets are a great example because they're just so important to so many people for their well-being. It broke my heart. Spicy Tuna talking about her situation. We had people we were filming for our docuseries where they were going through a traumatic medical situation with their kid. The dog had just bit someone and needed training, and they were in the position where without their basic income, they would have had to give the dog away or put him down. They were able to afford, you know, to hire a trainer for the week or whatever it took to sort of train the dog, train themselves, and get a system going and keep their best friend. And out of all the traumatic, awful things that they went through and were resilient through, the entire 3 years we were with them, I never saw them quite so devastated as when they were thinking about having to give away Jackson. But they were able to keep, you know, their pets are family members, and to treat it any otherwise is another form of dehumanization almost, because you're dehumanizing the things that are important to the people who have those pets.
Yeah, exactly. Like they are family members. They are very important, and yeah, no, I fully agree with you. Sorry.
I wanted to say, I know we're getting near the end. I just wanted to say that when the news came out, and I had sort of pushed it, I repressed it a bit, but even for UBI advocates in the U.S., the cancellation of your Ontario pilot was pretty devastating news, because it was such a unique and well-designed pilot in so many ways. You know, there were certain things I would have done differently, but also compared to other things, having a saturation site, having a clawback rate, having it be 3 years, having a disability bump, having all the different things you could measure with this. Having that cut short was just such a slap in the face. Even as someone
Yes.
who just wanted to see the results.
Yeah, I was enraged personally too. Not only from the basic income perspective, which of course I have, but even from the from my background in psychology, from like the scientific perspective. Like I was enraged as like a scientist, thinking about this, like how when it comes to experiments with human beings, I mean, these are human beings, and you've got to go out of your way to make sure that you don't do anything that would end up harming these people that are volunteering to be part of this. And it was unbelievable to me that Doug Ford's administration did what he did, even just from that perspective, where yeah, you've got a breach of contract is one thing, but this was a breach of contract involving humans in an experiment that they were volunteering to be part of. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, from that
And
angle, it's
Yeah.
completely unethical. Like, and I don't know if this is an angle that's being taken in the lawsuit, but it should be. I don't know, but it's just from another way of looking at it, just so that maybe we can think of it not as all entirely in vain. Like in the mountain of evidence that's coming out about the effectiveness of basic income through what everybody are calling experiments, right? Like these are somehow, just calling them experiments already seems a little weird, but if it was an experiment, we
Yeah.
now have the evidence for the experiment of what happens when you give somebody this and then immediately take it away, right? Like that counts for something. Like there, we can now clearly say what will happen in that case, right? Which is something that people talk about. Like it's a question that people have of like, well, what happens if the government just takes it away, and what would happen then? And sadly, we kind of know.
There was a
Yeah.
reaction that was entirely unexpected for me to see recently post class action lawsuit going forward, and I'm curious if Jesse or Tom, if you have come across this too. But it was this kind of concern that that the participants of the basic income pilot were somehow like greedily trying to get this money and like that that like somehow this view from other people would be like, you got a year's worth. What are you complaining about? I didn't get anything, and who were you to like try to sue your way into this money that doesn't belong to you anyways? And then this was even from someone who's pro basic income. So then they're actually worried that somehow it like a kickback kind of or pushback response to this lawsuit would be somehow people being more upset at the basic income pilot participants. So have you heard anything about like that kind of take on this, or is that a very rare take?
I've seen that kind of discourse on Twitter, X, and Reddit. Like it's interesting seeing the response. It's been very polarizing. Um, I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, except it seems to come from the same school of the people who are like, I don't want my hard-earned money, the parasite leech sort of discourse. And I don't want my taxpayer money going towards funding these people, or you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. It's interesting, and I've been puzzling through it because I don't really understand why this like I have suffered so other people deserve to suffer um train of thought has so much like so many people behind it. It honestly confuses me. But I have seen that, and I have seen people upset about why should we get that sort of money. It kind of reminds me of like back in the 90s when the woman who got burned by the coffee at McDonald's sued McDonald's and won a tremendous amount of money for it. But like it really did not affect McDonald's income at all. And it was a very like fair settlement. So it makes me think of that situation. If you don't know that historical context. I can explain
it also
that
got blown way out of the water, and she got villainized.
Exactly.
And it's like, oh, she got a little hot coffee on her, but it was beyond scalding, and she needed major surgeries and things like that. And we didn't learn about that until 15 years later, when someone uncovered it.
Exactly.
The news was like, this is how ridiculous Americans are, and they're suing McDonald's for millions of dollars. It's like McDonald's hurt her very, very badly, and it cost her a lot of money. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in periods of economic anxiety, such as we're facing now, there's more of a there's more often this sort of pointing fingers attitude, I think, because people are concerned about themselves and whether they'll be able to pay the bills and pay the mortgage or pay the rent. And so I think that can be a natural response in some cases. But again, if we look at the impact of basic income, all the evidence from all the pilots in the US and here in Canada, as well as elsewhere, shows that it could have a tremendous benefit for all of society. So again, it's just being able to have sometimes those difficult conversations about what it really means and how it could benefit us all in the long run.
Yeah.
We're at 2:00 here, and just one more thing to end this with. I'm just curious. Let's say that let's say a year from now, fingers crossed, that's a year. But class action lawsuit reaches its conclusion, and the participants win the lawsuit. $200 million goes towards the participants.
$50,000 each.
Right. And wouldn't it be interesting if the participants were like, I would like that as a basic income, please?
For me personally, I'm not opposed to the idea at all.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see, if you're given a choice, like if the Ontario recipients were given a choice, would you go with the 50,000 lump sum, or would you go with the monthly amount for the 2 years that you missed out on? What would you choose? I'd just be very curious to see if they actually, we want the basic
I'd
income.
want to see another very strong contract that says we're not going to turn this off in another year.
No, yeah, it would not be to the government.
Yeah.
I'm talking about an annuity choice. This is not government provided. This has nothing to do with the government like somehow issuing this. I'm saying that, lump sum, kind of like a lottery win, lump sum or monthly. What would you choose?
I don't know. Like, I haven't thought about it that way. I sort of assumed lump sum, and I've made some thoughts in my mind of what that would look like as a lump sum and what I would do. It's mostly pay off my credit card, put things into savings, and consider what investment looks like. But if it were a monthly thing, I think I would go back to finally taking that damn business off the shelf and starting it. I would really, 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 really like to see that more than anything. Is the conclusion of my journey is that I finally start the business that I spent so much time and money and fighting the government to keep, and have that story be done.
I see that as the start of a journey. I feel like we spend so much of our lives in these systems of precarity waiting to start. I don't see for me, it was getting funding for projects after switching careers and stuff. That was, years and years and years of just dogged trying and searching and then working at restaurants and finally getting to move into the work I wanted to do. It feels like, okay, great. I'm 40 years old and now I'm going to start, UBI to me is letting people start when they're ready to start,
I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's a good place to end. And, just thank you so much, Tom and Jesse and Spicy. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And really good luck with the lawsuit. I personally, of course, hope that ends with a win. And Jesse, that you get your 50,000 and you get to actually be in the position where you get to choose what to do with it. And I would love to see the result of this be not only your business, being restarted, and just to see that that all these other ambitions that the participants had, being able to return to those, being able to just, I want it to be made right. And yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your stories with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great, great chatting. And for those of us in Canada, we have an opportunity to do it again next month because we are holding Canada's first standalone basic income guarantee conference in Ottawa from May 23rd to 26th. So those who are interested, or any visitors who want to come to Canada for it, you're more than welcome. We're at forum2024.ca. And check out the itinerary and program, and we hope you can join us in Ottawa.
I'll see you there.
Yeah. Can't wait to see you. Can't wait to see you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.